I'm going to say something to you now that I suspect many of you will find rather controversial, maybe even ridiculous, but I hope you'll hear me out. There is no real relationship between religion and spirituality. Spirituality has nothing to do with religion. There is no real relationship between the esoteric and the exoteric. Genuine spirituality cannot manifest as religiosity. It simply can't. Now, in an attempt to justify these statements, let me say a few things about the difference between the spiritual and religious impulses in man. Hopefully at the end of that you'll have an idea of where I'm coming from, even if perhaps you don't find cause to entirely agree. The spiritual impulse is an explicitly personal thing. It's about us as individuals and our personal relationship to reality and our place therein. The spiritual impulse is basically the same thing as the philosophic impulse. It's that which drives us to ask the essential questions posed by philosophy. It's about establishing what is true and where we fit in that framework. It's at once a flight from the suffering wrought by our ignorance of such matters, and one to a perceived state of knowledge or comfort, or happiness, or completion. The journey of spirit, or the journey to philosophical truths, is one that can be undertaken only by the individual. You can't share the direct, subjective experiences of mind with others, and frankly, nor do you need to. The religious impulse, on the other hand, whilst nominally manifesting in a spiritual context, is nevertheless about entirely different drives and urges. It's an impulse to share, to congregate, to fit in, to be accepted, to have a framework for life laid out for us. It's the impulse of the herdliness in us. The difference between the spiritual impulse and the religious is a bit like the difference between a fashion designer and those that simply wear clothes to be fashionable. Religion is but fashion in a quasi-spiritual dress. The Pope says it's good in God's eyes to wear pink and purple berets. Suddenly, everyone is wearing pink and purple berets, all the while thinking themselves spiritual. To the degree that any religious person consciously selects their religion and faith, they merely don an outfit they believe will make them fit in and keep them with the fashion of the time. They do this in every other facet of their lives, so why not this one as well? Of course, most religious people are born and conditioned into their faith and don't make much in the way of conscious choices in relation to it, save that of remaining within it perhaps, so I'm probably being a tad generous here. Still, in that generous vein, let's assume that the religious at least have some kind of functioning mind, if only for the sake of argument. The spiritual impulse is about striving for truth, the religious about resting in popular belief systems. The spiritual impulse is suspicious of religious faith, the religious suspicious of spiritual reason. The spiritual impulse values the pursuit of the individual mind, the religious the emotional highs of shared rituals. The spiritual impulse does not concern itself with the vagaries and whims of beliefs. The religious cannot do other than concern itself with such things, since it is bound up in them. A cursory examination of history makes clear that humans are psychologically constituted in such a way as to cause the religious impulse to win out over the spiritual in all but a small minority of persons. The spiritual impulse finds its most complete expression in the philosopher. And I'm not including academics working in university philosophy departments, since they don't really qualify. One will not find a philosopher on every other street corner, but one will most certainly find a religious devotee, a dedicated follower of fashion. The message of men such as Jesus and Buddha were entirely about one's pursuit of personal spiritual drives, one's individual relationship to God or reality. Yet in no time at all, the clamourers after ease and comfortable clothes turned their message into religions. where belief in congregation mattered more than the striving for what is true and real. No, there simply isn't any real relationship between spirituality and religion. There simply cannot be.